I'm Doug Shear, and I'm happy to welcome you to the Byrdcliffe Forum, a project of the Woodstock Byrdcliffe Guild in Woodstock, New York. This Zoom event is part of the series called Woodstock Masters, which is featuring today the artist Portia Munson talking about her work and showing you her studio. It's being conducted on Thursday, May 13th, 2021 at 6 p.m. This event is being recorded and will be archived and shortly after posted to the Byrdcliffe YouTube channel. The comments made by speakers or by questioners reflect their opinions and thoughts and not those of the Byrdcliffe Forum, the Woodstock Byrdcliffe Guild, its staff, or volunteers. We are admitting you to listen to and see the event, intended to last about 50 minutes, but not to appear. Your brief questions or comments are invited at the end of the interview in a 10-minute time slot. To submit them, use text within the chat function, which you can find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I will then select some and read them to Portia. You may include your name if you wish. Portia Munson is a visual artist working in a range of media, including installation, sculpture, painting, drawing, video, and photography. Focusing primarily on cultural and environmental themes seen from a feminist perspective. Her recent solo exhibitions include The Garden at Meridians, Art Basel, Miami Beach, Pink Projects at Rockefeller Center in New York, The Garden at PPW Gallery, also in New York, Her Room, Her World at Bedford Gallery, Walnut Creek, California, Flood at Disjecta, Portland, Oregon, and Color Forms at Mass MoCA, North Adams, Massachusetts. Over the course of her 25-year career, her work has been included in dozens of exhibitions in the US and Europe. Some recent exhibitions include Cross-Pollination at Thomas Cole National Historic Site, Catskills, New York, an invitational exhibition, American Academy of Arts and Letters in New York City, Supernatural, 21 Museum Hotel, Nashville, Tennessee, Dime Store Alchemy at the Flag Art Foundation in New York, and Beyond Boundaries, Feminine Forms at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts in Philadelphia. Some of her public works include Art in the Terminal at the Albany Airport, MTA Arts for Transit at Bryant Park, and a permanent MTA installation in Brooklyn. Munson has a BFA from Cooper Union and an MFA from the Mason Gross School of Art at Rutgers. She attended the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture and has been awarded residencies at institutions including Civitella Ranieri in Umbertide, Italy, McDowell Colony for the Arts in New Hampshire, the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, and Yaddo in Saratoga Springs. Munson has taught at the School of Visual Arts, New York University, the Yale School of Art, Vassar College, and SUNY Purchase. She was awarded a Pollock Krasner Foundation grant in 2019, and she lives and works in Catskill, New York, and is represented by PPOW Gallery in New York City. Portia.
Thank you, Doug. Hello and welcome. Thanks for coming to see my work and hear me talk about it. Judy, do we have images ready to look at? So I'm going to, so I'm starting with a painting. I'm a painter. I work in a lot of different forms, but painting was my first art form. And this is a painting that's called Pink Wig. And my paintings generally have titles that are kind of obvious to what the object is. I paint still life paintings, and I paint things pretty close to the size that they actually are. So my paintings are quite small. Like this one is the size of a wig. You know, it's like 12 by 13 or something. And we can see the next slide. So I, for years, have collected pink plastic things and have been informed by my environment and by the things that I'm seeing around me, seeing in the world around me. And so I often will look at what's in the world around me and then deal with it in different ways, either through making these larger installations or singling single objects out of what I've been collecting and make paintings of them. The paintings are more of a really intense, focused gaze on an object. And the installations are kind of talking to the amassing and the accumulation of these objects. This piece, Pink Project Table, I began when I was a graduate student at Rutgers. Actually, I kind of began it earlier than that in the early 80s when I was at Cooper Union, but it sort of came together as a piece when I was a graduate student at Rutgers, because I was collecting these things and doing paintings of them, and then I realized that this big pile of pink stuff was taking up more and more of my studio, and that it was really a work in and of itself. And I love to arrange things and look at kinds of relationships of shapes and forms. And so that's something that goes on in these pieces. But this piece was really inspired by thinking about when I was a young woman, like, what does it mean to be identified with this color, and what is pink all about? We could see the next slide. And so I was kind of thinking about like why am I as a female being identified with this color? And so I started really thinking about that and amassing more and more and more of these objects in order to kind of get at, try to figure out and get at the meaning of this color. And it was quite interesting to see what things were produced in the color pink. And they were generally toys for little girls, pet toys, sex toys, cleaning products, beauty products, Valentine's, like all of these very kind of mundane, sort of generally kind of female focused objects. And anyway, that was sort of it's been like, in a way, these amassing and collecting and looking at these things are almost like my artist version of being a scientist and sort of investigating the world around me. We could see the next slide. So, oops, back one. So for some reason this is, so anyway, the pink table is very, very dense, and then it's moved on and it's taken different forms. It's taken the form of a mound, of vitrines, all different ways that I've sort of shown the amassing of these pink objects. The image that we're looking at right now is purse, girl's purse, and it's another sort of oil on linen painting where I've really focused in on this specific object. The image right before this was one called Mound, which is many of these plastic objects piled and collected together. I guess we could move on to the next one.
It's not letting me go backward. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's all right. I thought it looked like there was a backward and forward arrow that I saw in the lower left corner, but whatever, you can go forward, that's fine. So this is another piece that I did with the pink classic. Yeah, so maybe we'll just take a look at Mound for just a moment. And we could just see one more of the table before, that's one more before that. Yeah. So this is kind of like the Valentine end of this table. The table's quite large. It's about 8 feet wide and maybe 14 feet long, and it's sort of standard table height and has a skirt. And it's been shown maybe 4 or 5 times. Takes about a week to install. So then we can move forward, and there's, as you can see, thousands of pink objects on it. Then this piece is called Mound, and this is different pink stuff than what is on the table. Each piece I use different found pink things. So this is Mound, and this photograph of this piece was when it was shown at the SUNY Ulster campus gallery. Okay, we can go to the next slide. The next slide is going to be purse, and then which we've already talked about, and then we can see the next slide after that.
What is the matter? Here we go.
So this piece is called Her Coffin, and I was inspired to do this piece by the pink ribbon breast cancer awareness ribbon, and I was just thinking about how, and seeing that the pink ribbon, when I first started doing the pink project, the pink ribbon didn't exist. It seems like it's sort of not as prevalent as it was at one time, but when I decided to do this piece, it seemed like it was everywhere, and it was being used kind of as advertising on packaging, on products. And the pink ribbons themselves, and what things were being packaged in was plastic. And I was just really thinking about how the plastic itself is carcinogenic, and just kind of thinking about the whole sort of cycle of it. And so I had the idea to make this piece that I call Her Coffin. And I've arranged these small pink objects in kind of like I've sort of ombre'd them, like sort of in variations of color. We could see the next slide. So here's another view of it. And this was at my last show at PPOW Gallery. And that was called, that show was called The Garden. And so you can see in this image that it was shown with paintings of individual pink objects, that were on the wall behind it. So next slide. There's a detail, that's a detail of the coffin. And I kind of think about it as like a time capsule. So all the stuff is kind of just sealed in. And much of the pink stuff, you can sort of tell in this image, is found. It's already been used. And I source my stuff from yard sales and thrift shops and places like that. Roadsides, just, things I just find on the street. Next. I guess another thing I wanted to say, this is another still life painting of pink gloves called Gloves. So many of the pink plastic things, and of all the plastic things that you'll see in the various pieces, are very, they're short-lived. They themselves will live for a really long time, but they're not intended to be used over and over again. And so that's something that I've been really thinking about in relation to plastic and its existence in our world. We could see the next. So I had the privilege to show my work at Rockefeller Center. We could see the next slide. And it was quite exciting, as always, to show work in a very public place. So this is just a wide shot of where it was exhibited. One of the places, it was sort of exhibited throughout Rockefeller Center. We could see the next slide. And this piece is showing, I'm kind of thinking about, like, they're bags filled with pink plastic stuff that are filling under these dresses. And I'm just kind of thinking about the marketing of pink, and also the marketing of femininity, and how so much plastic and also ideas about femininity or ideas about the environment are sold and marketed to us. Okay, the next slide. Next slide. This is another shot at Rockefeller Center. We could see the next slide. And again. Okay, here's another painting. This one is called Pink Donuts. And a lot of times my paintings are a way for me to really slow way down and focus in on an object and really think about it, and sort of, it's almost a kind of meditation, and a meditation in observation. So yeah, Pink Donuts. Okay, next slide. Here's another kind of, it's pretty exciting to have my work in, this was during Chicago Art Fair, and this was out in Chicago, out on the, the loop around Chicago. Next slide. They had different artists that they were showing in this way, which was kind of fun. This is Perfume. So as you'll see in my studio and in some of these other slides, I've become more and more interested in the female form and how the female form is represented and sort of stereotyped. So this one is called Perfume. Next. Here's another iteration of the Pink project. This time in this work, it's called the Pink Bedroom. And the ceiling is covered with hundreds of, or not hundreds, but many, many onesies, little child onesies. And the walls are women's dresses and lingerie, and the floor with shoes. And then the room is just completely filled with everything that a girl or a woman would, want, told that they should have. This was at the Flag Art Foundation 2 summers ago. Okay, next slide. Here's a detail of the room. It's called the Pink Bedroom. We could see the next slide.
Oops, sorry.
That's all right. That's another view. And I guess one thing I want to say, if you could go back one thing I want to say about the Pink work is that when I was first doing, like, Pink has kind of shifted and become, it's much more like a very strong hot pink, or like a dark pink has become much more popular these days. And but when I was first doing it, this pale baby pink was really the dominant color. And it was very exciting when I first was amassing it and putting it together, because it went from being a color that felt really more passive into becoming a more powerful color because of the amassing of the color. And also like almost like owning and taking all these objects, like owning all of it. Okay, next slide. Here's a painting called Wonder. And I did this painting thinking about, I did this painting when I was having my children. So I was kind of thinking about reproduction and flowers, and thinking about flowers being like the sexual organs of plants, and kind of thinking about abundance, and also the wonder that you can experience through a child's eye. So we can see the next slide, the next image. So this piece is called The Garden. And I started this piece called The Garden around the same time that I did that painting. And this, it's a little hard to read it, but it's also a woman's bedroom, or a person's bedroom. And on the right side is a bed that's covered in bunnies. On the left, there's a love seat, or maybe directly back, there's a love seat, there's chairs, there's dressers, there's a whole room of furniture in here. And this room is about 20 feet by 20 feet, and this with a canopy hanging down to maybe 7 or 8 feet in the center. And the canopy above is made with many floor-length floral dresses all sewn together to make like a giant flower. And everything in this room, this is called the garden, and everything in this room is made up of floral found things that were manufactured and mass produced and marketed towards women. So that's sort of the theme. So I'm kind of thinking about this room as almost like a celebration of life. So it's like thinking about procreation, but at the same time, it also is kind of like a funeral. And also I'm thinking about ideas about beauty. And I guess I was also kind of questioning and thinking like, why is it that, women often, put on perfume to smell like flowers, or will to some degree, adorn their homes like flowers, or adorn themselves in floral jewelry or floral dresses. So I was kind of thinking about this. I was also thinking about historic period rooms. And so this, again, like I think of a lot of these pieces that I'm doing as kind of time capsules of a moment in time in our culture. Okay, next. I think I have several. This is a vanity from the garden, covered with all kinds of things multiple different things that would be on a woman's vanity. Next slide. Here's another shot of the garden. Okay, next slide. This is a detail of the bed. And when of the end of the headboard of the bed, and above it, there's another little piece that I called that piece Worship, and it's all these bunnies smushed into a one of those announcement, I don't know what they're called, like the signage that's out in front of a community center or in front of a church. And when I lived in Provincetown, I went to the Fine Arts Work Center and was there for 3 different winters. And I would go every day to what they call the swap shop, the dump that had a free thrift shop at it, and collect things. And that's sort of where how this piece sort of got started, with all of this free stuff. Okay, next. This is just another shot of the garden. It's a mirror made out of plastic flowers that I took apart and then put back together. And you can see the bed behind it. This is a painting of a green skull and a green plastic skull. And again, I'm thinking about, in this painting, about the kind of like life and death in relation to the environment and plastic, and how we have come to like need and rely on all this plastic, but how it's also kind of killing us. Next. This is a piece called Lawn, and this piece is made up of all this found green plastic. This was exhibited at PPOW Gallery, among other places, and the size is variable, and it was sort of a grid that was filling up the gallery floor, and I arranged all of the green objects in shades of green, and it was begun when I was staying at a dune shack out in the dunes on Cape Cod, and walking the beach every day and just picking up the plastic and then sort of saving it and looking at it, and saw that this was started in the early to mid 1990s. And I was just seeing this sort of this trend towards green plastic, and that the green plastic was being used to market sort of sinister things, but the color green was, I guess now it's actually called like greenwashing, but at the time I was like, oh, that's so interesting that this color green is becoming sort of dominant and being used to sell somewhat sinister things. So, okay, we can see the next. And this is another piece called Sarcophagus, kind of along the same idea. And this is filled with green plastic thing that I've layered according to color.
That's all right.
And just kind of thinking about, again, I'm kind of trying, in this piece, I was really trying to think about like how in maybe 100 years, this will be really become like a real oddity, that maybe we will have really moved away from plastic. And I was thinking about how when my grandparents were children, there really wasn't plastic, and so I was trying to imagine when my children's or when my grandchildren or great grandchildren are in this world, maybe again there will hardly be any plastic. And so this is a sarcophagus, like something to be looked at as a strange thing, like that all of these things were made in plastic. So I'm sort of thinking of it somewhat hopefully. And this piece again is a similar theme. This is called Future Fossils. And this is a piece that I did for the Albany Airport, laid out all these pieces. And this is a painting of, again, I'm thinking sometimes with the paintings, I sort of work on various ideas, and just, it's so striking that it's almost impossible to go to the supermarket and come home and not come home buying plastic. Like you go to the supermarket to get tomatoes or yogurt or whatever it is that you're getting, and you're basically buying, part of your bag is filled with plastic. And so that's what I was thinking about in this painting of tomatoes. Next. And this is a night light. So I was kind of thinking again about this nature versus like the artificialness, like a natural thing, but sort of joining these natural and artificial. Next. This is called Reflecting Pool, and it's a pool filled with blue plastic that's also arranged in shades of blue. And I first was working with blue because I was thinking about pink is for girls, but blue is for boys. So I started collecting blue to really see what was going on with the color blue. And it was interesting to me to see that the blue, some of it is really male focused, but a lot of blue is really about water and about trying to sell this idea of water sports, things that you would do at the beach, but also clean drinking water and this idea of cleanness and water. I don't know. So that was really interesting in collecting it. We could see the next slide. That's a detail of the reflecting pool, which is this piece is made with an above ground pool that I've cut down to half height and then put it into a gallery and then filled it with all this blue plastic. Okay, the next. That's another detail that to me just seemed sad, that I just sort of put together this blue eraser of a polar bear on top of blue styrofoam. And just thinking about the ice caps and melting and the plight of the polar bears. This is called Flood. And this is at a gallery called Disjecta in Portland, Oregon. And this is quite a large gallery that I just filled with all of this blue plastic. And this was, thinking about different kinds of floods that are inundating different parts of the world. And also the images that we see of plastic, like flooding our world too. And with this piece, when I did this piece, I was able to work closely with the transfer station, one of the transfer stations, also known as like the dump in the city of Portland. And it was interesting to learn. They went through their line, they sort recycled plastics, and they were saving and putting out blue plastic for me. So I got a lot of this from the dump and was able to use it in this piece. And through talking to them and visiting the dump, it was fascinating. Schools and children and all different people can go and do tours there, which I think is a really important, fabulous thing that everybody should have to go and like tour transfer stations and dumps. And I learned that all of the trash from these transfer stations in Portland were going, and they were basically filling up this valley between these mountains. And once that valley was filled, I don't know what they were going to do, but it's just kind of amazing to think about what we're doing with plastic, and how plastic is becoming like a thin layer, like a striated layer of the earth. You know, in historic, you can go to the next slide, but the idea that eventually, this is another detail, eventually back when you look back in time, they'll be like, we're living in sort of the plastic age, like there'll be this coating of plastic that covers the earth. Okay, next. So this is an installation shot from a show that I did a number of years ago at PPOW. And it was part of, I'd shown the reflecting pool at the same time as this, this installation shot. So this was also called Reflecting Pool. And this is Dandelion Wallpaper. I made Dandelion Mandalas and then blew it up large and then put these images of birds on top of it. And I was thinking about the dandelion as being a flower or a weed that has been really targeted by Roundup and chemicals like that, and how destructive those chemicals are to us, but also to the natural world, including the birds and the species that, including us, that live, you know, right around lawns. Okay, next. And so now I'm just going to show you a series of images that I have shown on this kind of wall, these dandelion wallpaper walls. And what I do with this work, you could go to the next image. This work is made with birds and creatures that I've found along roadsides, or people have given me if they've found a beautiful little bird. That's good, you can stop for a minute. That has crashed into their window. This was a hummingbird that someone found that it had gotten trapped in their sunroom and died. And so what I do is when I find one, usually I find them on the roadside, but if someone gives me one, like in this case with this hummingbird, I'll take it and I'll put it on my flatbed scanner, and I'll scan it with flowers that are blooming in my garden, or in the case of the bluebird, maybe we could go back 2 images. In the case of the bluebird, oh, 1 image, yeah. That this one, someone found on the side of the road and gave it to me, and it was the winter time, and so I used these sort of dry, dead flowers from my garden to circle it. So they're kind of meant to be, as you could go forward, they're kind of meant to be honoring of the bird, and Memento Mori is like kind of mourning but celebrating these birds. And I'm sort of documenting what happened on this day. So I keep a record of what the date was, where the bird was found. And then once I've finished with these images, most of the birds I pass on to like a research place, a museum, or someplace that can utilize the birds. And these are all like 1-to-1 scale. So they're done at the time. Like this bird was laid on this scanner at the same time as these flowers. They're not created in Photoshop. They're created on the scanner. So this is a very little bird that's with those flowers. And this is a woodpecker. And you could go to the next one. This one, I call this one juvenile. It was in the spring and a very young bird. It hit a window. This one is Pileated Woodpecker that a friend found in actually in Bearsville, and they found it on the road there, and asked me if I would like to do a piece with it, and I did. I just I don't know, I feel like it's kind of important. It's almost like about like taking the time to stop and actually look at these creatures that, you know, that are hit, that are on the side of the road. And I'm really thinking about how kind of treacherous our world has become to birds and to small creatures with the roads and the large plate glass windows. And I encourage anyone who has large windows, which is most of us, to try to get the stickers and put stickers or things up in order to alert the birds to these things, to the windows. That's a screech owl. And then I've done several public pieces with this kind of work. And so this was an MTA project. This is on the D line out in Brooklyn at Fort Hamilton Parkway Station. And I did 6 different of these large window arrays that are, permanent, whatever that means. Next, I think there's a few details of this work. You could just go through these. Yeah, this is what the piece is like there, and that's another detail. And then I think there's another image of a different window. There's sort of glass windows, so there's light coming from behind, from the daylight. And then this was at Bryant Park, light boxes. This was up for, I think, a year or so, underground, underneath Bryant Park in the subway system. And this is a piece at Albany Airport, no longer in this location, down right now, but being moved to another location. And then we could go on to the next. Sometimes I just do these large mandalas of just flowers without the creatures. This is what I first started doing. And I started doing these pieces when I was thinking about when someone close to me died, and they're around, not long after the 9/11. And I was just thinking about the fleeting lives of humans and flowers and of life in general, and how beautiful life is, and sort of celebrating life with flowers and with these arrays. And currently I have work up. This is a piece that just went up at Catsban across the river. I think you can maybe only see this if you have tickets to see one of the performances there, but it's going to be up all summer, and they have different dance and music events happening all summer. And I think they're going to also have a movie events happening there too. Okay, next slide. These are the last ones. So currently there's also 3 and will be a 4th shortly up at Olana. And these are along the paths at Olana, and you can go and see these. These are all on silk, as is the one at Catspan, and they're suspended high up. You could go to the next image. They're suspended high up in the trees, and they're quite large, and they're really meant to sort of bring attention to the loss of birds. I don't know if all of you have heard, but that there was a study that was released over the past year that talked about how many billions of birds in just America, in the US alone, have been lost in the past, I forget, since the 1950s, maybe even more recently than that, because of environmental loss of habitat, windows, cars, cities interrupting their migration. And it's just kind of tragic. And so I'm sort of celebrating these animals, but also they are dead animals that are mostly roadkill. And I'm hoping to really to help people sort of think about like our environmental impact, and what simple things can we do to make our windows more visible to birds, or drive a little slower, pay more attention. I don't know. I don't know what we can do. Anyway, next, I think there's one more image. Yeah, this one is also at Olana. So now what I'm thinking of doing is I was going to show you all my studio. Let's take a couple of minutes and show you what I've been working on here. This is my drawing spot. I sit here, I have a pink sheet in my window in order to make it easier to see. And I like to do these still life drawings of various objects that I collect, and also watercolors. Here's a painting of an object, which I will show you in a moment, which is on this piece, which is called Bound Angel. And I've taken out and did a painting of this particular object. But this piece is quite a large piece that's pretty much done, but I'm still just tweaking it a little bit. It will be in my next show, which will be sometime over the next year or so at PPOW and in New York. And the tablecloth are several large wedding dresses that make up the tablecloth. And then the tabletop is covered with these found objects that are representations of women that are bound. And I'm thinking about, by binding them, I'm sort of thinking about our being bound to different sort of givens and different notions about femininity and the female form. I'm just going to turn on the lights. Let's see. So it looks like that. And here's another smaller piece on the same theme, and a painting also on that. And then I thought I would show you some of my, these are some of my drawings. These drawings I call they're the functional women drawings. So they're drawings of objects that are in the form of women or parts of women and also have a function. And behind these drawings are the samples for one of the silk banners, the one that's at Catspawn. Here's another painting that I've just kind of finished. This one is spittoon. And I'll show you the other side of the studio. It's a pink piece. And these are scans, these large pieces are scans of individual functional women objects that I've scanned and then blown up large. And this piece is called Ho. And it's made up of all these objects that are tied to this woman in pantyhose, and her skirt is made up of gloves and black nylons. This is where I sit and paint, work on my paintings. I'll come around here. I've just been finishing that painting of the spittoon and working on this other painting here that is still not finished.
We probably should open to questions now, Portia.
Yeah, that's fine. That's pretty much it. That's my studio. That's what's happening.
Okay, I'm going to find Doug. There he is. Oh, nope. There you go.
Great. Well, we don't have any comments in chat at the moment, so I would invite people to do that if they can think of comments they would like to make or questions that they would like to direct to you. I will read them from the chat. But one thought I had that I was going to ask myself is, how do these things get preserved I'm not thinking so much about an individual collector or of course a museum takes a piece in, they then become responsible for its preservation and proper installation, proper storage. But for you, in terms of the future, preserving your own estate, let's say, or your children doing so, how do you see preserving some of these more mound-like, mound-like installations, tabletop installations, et cetera? Have you numbered individual components, or are they actually glued together, or are they more loosely collected? Maybe you could explain that a little bit.
Yeah, nothing is glued together. The pieces like her coffin and sarcophagus, in those pieces, they're they're fixed in a contained glass case. Right. But the other pieces like the table or the garden, those pieces are all those are all documented with photographs, and like the Pink Project table is very carefully photographed and then boxed so that the boxes correspond to photographs, so that they'll be you'll have to refer to the photographs when it's being set up again. And the same with the garden. And the garden is actually in a collection called 21C, and it's going to be I'm going to be installing it for them in Louisville, Kentucky, at a place called 21C, which is a series of hotels and there are also museums. And that's going to be installed in the fall. And then I believe it's going to a permanent home at a 21C hotel museum in St. Louis, which then I'll also, it's combined with photographing it, and then, I'll help them initially to install it. And the pieces like the mound or lawn with the green plastic or reflecting pool or flood, those are all, they're packed so that they're packed in these shades of blue, and then it will really just be kind of loosely basing it on photographs. And I'm not necessarily so super concerned that everything goes exactly how it was. It's more like the idea of how it was done.
Do you look at some of your work as being allegorical in nature?
Yes, I do. Definitely. Yes.
And therefore symbolic, I guess, certainly symbolic in many instances.
Yeah. That really resonates when I think about the paintings, because I used to do portraits, and I did portraits of people, and then I realized that I didn't really need to be doing portraits of people, that I could really be saying what I wanted to say with the objects that people, that belong to people, that was more that was really the important thing, like those kinds of, that the objects could really stand in for the people. So, and I think that's what you could say that about all of my work. It's sort of, I'm commenting on who we are and who we are as a culture, and all through our objects and through our discarded objects. Yeah.
So we don't have a single nibble in the chat, which is unusual. No,
I have a question.
You did a terrific job of talking about your work, and you certainly gave us many different examples to ponder, which I think was fascinating. I was less familiar with the mandala-like things that you showed of your work, which are very compelling. I mean, to me, I thought it's almost like a whole different thought pattern of yours. I mean, you're delving into a different territory in that work, which is just as compelling, but different in terms of how it's, how it's emoting than the mounds or the assemblage sort of work. But just as compelling.
there are some questions, but for some reason they came direct to me
Okay,
instead
so
of going to everyone.
why don't you go right ahead and mention them?
Okay, let me open this up so that I can see it.
Okay.
Caroline B says, in regard to installations, when you first started doing them, did you ever feel restricted or limited in any way, like by logistics, like space, for example? And if so, how did you work through that?
Well, I'm really fortunate. Yes, that's true. I did, but I'm fortunate to live in the country and to have a fair amount of space where I live. But there was a time when we just had like an old pickup truck out in the yard and it was filled with pink plastic stuff. So there have been logistical issues, and it also has, like, I've had different ideas for work that I've considered doing, and because it would require a lot of culling and accumulating of so much stuff, I've actually decided to not do some of those pieces. So yeah, I mean, stuff is like a big issue for our culture. You know, that's like one of the big things. What do we do with all of our stuff, with all of our trash? And it's this whole thing of these storage units that so many people have to put your extra stuff in is, you know, and the dumps and filling up this land with that I described in Portland, which is happening everywhere. Like, where do we put the trash? Where do we put the stuff we don't want anymore?
All right, another question is, did you collect things as a child? And if so, what kinds of things?
Yeah, I collected pink things, of course. And I think that's sort of all I can think of but I've always been kind of a collector, but in terms of a theme, I think that would be a constant theme in my life. And when I started at Cooper Union, when I was, you know, in undergraduate school, when I was 18, I started to really think more critically about what it meant and what it might have to say, the color.
And Oscar Buitrago says, your artwork is so incredibly thought-provoking. I'd be interested in what is the most positive and negative reactions you've gotten to your work.
Wow. That's hard to say. I don't know. I mean, a funny thing that kind of comes to mind is I was like so like just thrilled at when the pink table was being shown. I mean, there's so many examples. I don't know why I've come up with this silly one, but the pink table was showed at Frieze London, and some, you know, very fancy looking woman came in and was very curious about it and left her card with I was sort of standing in the background just kind of observing, and it turned out it was Picasso's granddaughter. And I was just granddaughter, I think it was his granddaughter, and I was like, wow, that's really that felt like something else to have someone like that who was like really into that work. But I think, and it's also been really exciting to see when the pink work was shown at Frieze, how many men were really into it and really felt very comfortable with it, which was kind of different from when it was shown 20 years earlier at the New Museum. Not that there weren't, you know, of course, like artists and, you know, men who thought it was great, but there was definitely kind of a shift that I noticed, and that was kind of exciting. One of a funny, weird thing is I did a whole series of tongue paintings, calf tongues of meat, these tongues, and they were being exhibited, and someone came in and they were very, very realistically painted, and someone commented on what amazing peppers I had painted. And I thought that was really quite funny.
Last question I see here, Kara says, have you done a self-portrait with objects, and what objects would you choose to represent yourself? Well, in a certain sense, you could say like every artist's work is some
sort of a self-portrait, you know, in a sense, everything that you're making is kind of a self-portrait of yourself. But I've painted self-portraits, and I painted, the most recent painting that I did was of myself in a sort of a light up kind of vanity beauty mirror, where I'm completely distorted because I had the magnifying glass on. So I'm like, it's a very distorted image of myself. But I like to think of these larger pieces, like I think that the pink bedroom or the garden or the table, like these large installations, those feel like self-portraits in a sense, although I really do not want my work to be seen as about me, because I'm not trying to make the work necessarily about myself. I'm trying to make work that's commenting on the larger culture.
With
I have a
that
technical-
thought, with that thought, if I may, I'd like to thank Portia Munson, our Woodstock Master Artist today, and also thank Judy Kerman, our Zoom operator, and Byrdcliffe staff, including Heather Olson. If you'd like to support what we're doing at Byrdcliffe, you can easily make donations by going to the website and just using the donate button. You'll find it very conveniently located. And thank you all for attending and being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.